How's everybody doing today? We got a little more energy, people. Come on. Everybody having a good day? Good Sunday? It's a beautiful day outside? Cool. Well, We are wrapping up our series, Be Rich. And if you haven't been with us over the last couple weeks, maybe you're wondering to yourself, well, what is Be Rich all about? Where does that title come from? The title of Be Rich comes from words that the Apostle Paul wrote to a young protege of his named Timothy. And this is what we read in 1 Timothy chapter 6. Paul says, "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment." He says, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. And from that verse, we get the three sort of central words to this series: give, serve, love. Over the 3 weeks, we're talking about giving, serving, and loving. How do we, as the people of God, make an impact in our community? And like I said, they come directly from 1 Timothy chapter 6 here. For example, Paul says, be rich in good deeds. And from that, we get the concept of service. And last week, we invited you to partner with us to serve, to give of your time, to make a difference with one of our local nonprofit partners. And many of you signed up to make a difference. Paul also said, we'll be generous and willing to share. And from that, we get the concept of giving. And in week 1, we invited every single person to consider making a one-time donation of $39.95 to Be Rich. And our promise to you was that we would take 100% of what you donated through Be Rich and give it to our community partners to help meet a financial need that they have in this season. And many of our partners not only have volunteer needs, but they have financial needs in this season. Now, if you weren't here one of those first 2 weeks, or you haven't yet signed up to serve or to give yet, it's not too late. You can go to berich.lakesawyerchurch.org to sign up or to give on that website. And maybe you're wondering, well, what's the goal? What's the number goal? How many people of serving do you need? And the reality is we don't have a dollar amount goal. We don't have a specific number of volunteers that we need. We have just set a goal of 100% participation. That we want everyone who's a part of Lake Sawyer to join with us to help make a difference and an impact within these organizations in our community that we work with together. This morning, as we wrap up this series, we're going to look at the last piece of Paul's words there, when he says, command them to do good. And from that, we get the concept of love. Now, I believe that love is one of the defining characteristics of what it means to be a follower of Christ. Matter of fact, look at what Jesus himself says. He says this in verse 35 of John 13. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. By your actions, by your love, will tell the world that we are his followers. That we are known for love, that we are people of love. Now, let's be honest for a second. It can be pretty easy for us to love people who have the ability to love us in return. So maybe it's your spouse. Maybe you can love your spouse because you receive love back from your spouse. Maybe it's your kids. Most of us love our kids, not all the time. We get frustrated with kids. But yeah, we love our kids. Our kids love us in return. Our family loves us. We receive love in return. But what do we do with people who cannot reciprocate love? What do we do when we don't feel that love in return? As Christians, how should we respond when we don't receive love from other people? And Jesus tells us what we're supposed to do. Jesus actually answers that question. We read this in Luke chapter 6. He says, if you just love those who love you, well, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. Like, if we're just going to kind of be the people who only love people who love us in return, then there's nothing that sets us apart from the rest of the world. But we aren't like everyone else. That we are people who have been bought by love. We are people who have been sent out to love others. We're not called to only love the people that can reciprocate love to us. We're called to love everyone. And we can do this, we have the strength to be able to do this, not because of the love that we receive from others. And if we're hoping that the love that we receive from others is going to give us enough strength and energize us enough to go out and to love people who don't love us in return, we'll never have enough strength. Because we're not relying on others. We can love because God has loved us first. Matter of fact, that's exactly what we read in 1 John chapter 4. We love because he has loved us first. That God is and should always be the source of love. That through the Godhead, we also see the ultimate example of love when Jesus willingly surrendered his life as a sacrifice for each and every one of us. Each and every one of us. And so our capacity to love others is directly tied to our ability to remain in God's love, to remain tied to the source. And it's not just, you don't have to listen to me. I mean, Jesus himself says so much. This is what we read in John 15. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I mean, Jesus tells us to remain in his love, to remain in the Father's love, a love that is unflappable, a love that is sacrificial. And then Jesus goes on in verse 10, he says that we are to keep his commands. And this is one of those things where I believe, as like for many of us as Christ followers, that we really miss the heart of what Jesus is getting at here, because we think, well, when Jesus says meet the commands, that somehow God's love is tied to our ability to do everything that he's asked us to do. Like his love is contingent upon us doing all of these things. And when we have that approach, I really believe we miss some of the heart of God. And it's not just us, because the reality is this has been something that you see throughout the pages of Scripture. That even as far back as the people of Israel, the people of Israel believed very much the same thing. When the people of Israel were in prominence in the Old Testament, that they lived under what was considered the law. And the law consisted of 613 individual commands. And they believed there was an expectation, a burden upon them to actually fulfill, to carry out each and every one of those commandments. And so they wore that weight of what they thought it meant to follow God. That compliance became a burden for them. But in just a few short words, Jesus himself not only sets Israel free from that burden, but he sets us free from that burden as well. In just 2 sentences, Jesus gets to the heart behind the law. He helps us understand the purpose of the law. And this is what he says. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this. Love your neighbor as yourself. That there is no greater commandments than these. I mean, Jesus takes 613 laws, and in 2 sentences, he sets us free. He says, if you want to know the purpose of the law, if you want to know why it was there, if you want to know the heart behind it, here it is. Love. Love God with everything that you have. And to love your neighbor, to love other people as if you were loving yourself. That love is at the center of the law. That love is the center of Jesus' summary. It's the heart behind God's commandments. And that love is not only central to following God, but it's also central to living life as the people of God. And when we do this, when we lean into love, when we understand that that is our purpose, Jesus tells us that there is a byproduct, that there is something that will come out of this behavior. There is something good that will come out of being people of love. This is what he says. He says, look, in John 15, he says, I have told you this. And what he's referring to is the whole concept of remaining in him as he remains in his Father's love. He said, I told you all of this so that my joy may be complete in you. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Jesus says joy is the byproduct of living out God's commands. That when we follow God, joy is a part of our lives. Now, I've heard sometimes people say, well, if you follow God, if you love God, if you just like life will be easy. Like following God makes your life easy. And I believe this firmly. Nowhere in the Bible does it say following God will make life easy. But what it does say, time and time again, is that when you follow God, when you live the kind of life that he has called us to, our lives will be filled with joy, which is different than what many of us search for. Many of us in our lives, we search for happiness, which is partly why loving others is so difficult. Because if you're loving someone who cannot love you in return, if you're loving someone who can't or won't reciprocate love back to you, it's hard to be happy in those moments because you feel the pain of that. And if you're searching for happiness, you're going to struggle to love others. But if your search isn't happiness and it's joy, you can get through it. Because joy is everlasting. Joy is eternal. I believe true joy can only be found in Christ. And so Jesus closes out his thoughts here in John 15 and verse 12. He says, look, my command is this: love each other as I have loved you. It's a pretty simple command. If you want to do what God has called you to do, if you want to live life as the people of God, then you are called to go out and to love others. To love people who can reciprocate that love back, but also to go love people who can't. And for those of us who've placed our lives in Christ, for those of us who've surrendered our lives to Christ, we know the sacrifice that Jesus has made for us. We know the price and the cost of that sacrifice. We know that it caused him to surrender his life for us. We understand that. But yet at the same time, we also can see the places in our lives or the times in our life where we have failed to reciprocate that love to others. And so on one hand, we can understand all that Jesus has done for us. On the other hand, we can acknowledge that we have failed to love him as he has loved us. And you could make the point, well, then should Jesus not love us? If that's how we behave, if we only love people who love us, and that's okay, then if we're not reciprocating our love back to God, does that give Jesus the right not to love us? And the answer is no, because Jesus understands what real love is. He understands that it's not a reciprocal arrangement, that love is sacrificial. It's a willingness, it's a decision to willingly love others even if they cannot or won't love you back. And that is what we as Christians are called to do. We're called to love people because we are people who are defined and bought by love. Now, our point throughout this whole series is we wanted to help us as a church step into some of these concepts: give, serve, and love in very easy and tangible ways. Which is why we set a simple goal like, hey, $39.95. It's not enough money that's going to make you freak out, but it's enough money that you're going to feel a little bit of a pinch to begin to make a financial difference in the lives of some of our nonprofit partners. And we said, hey, we want you to serve. We're not talking about serving every day for months, but if you could just serve a little bit, and we give you some great opportunities, then you'll get an idea of what it feels like to step into service of others. And we want to do the same thing with love, because here's what I know. If I just say, go love the community, it's overwhelming. It's daunting, and it's hard to know where to start. And so for the last of our messages in this series, we wanted to, just like the other ways, give you a tangible way to begin to start loving people in your community. And so for that, I've invited one of our community partners, Tim Lee, who's the principal of Black Diamond Elementary School. He's agreed to come and to sit down with me. We can have a conversation. Because here's what I realized. There are a lot of people who need love in our world today. And but really, I think our educators are a great place to start, because our educators need to know their value. They need to know that they are loved. And that's true of every season, but it's especially true in this season. So I want you to hear a little bit from Tim, and then we're going to talk about some tangible ways that we can go about saying thank you and to show love to some of our educators. So would you do me a favor? Would you give a big Lake Sawyer welcome to Principal Tim Lee? Howdy.
How's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
You're doing so. I'm excited. This is always fun. The second time we do this, it's like, how do you have a completely different conversation that's the same conversation than the first hour? So it's going to be fun. But I'm going to ask you many of the same questions. The first one, though, is I've had the privilege to get to know you over the last 2 years. But for many people, especially people who don't have kids at Black Diamond Elementary School, they don't know you. So could you take a second just to introduce yourself, tell a little bit about your story, how you came about becoming the principal of Black Diamond Elementary School?
Yeah, so I said this in the last hour, and I think I was probably not what you would typically think of a person who's going to end up as a school principal. I think if you told many of my teachers that I had growing up, they would be pretty surprised. In fact, my wife's grandpa lives next to my former high school principal, and somehow it came up in conversation. I came up in conversation, and he told him what I was doing, and he goes, "Wow, I wouldn't have expected that." And I thought that was an interesting way to put it, but I get where he was. I get that. But I ended up on my journey and ended up in college one way or another, and then met my wife at Central Washington University, and once I got to college, I knew that I wanted to teach. I wanted to teach, and I wanted to coach. I had some people that made really great impacts on me, and I wanted to be able to take part in some of that same, those same sort of life lessons that I was able to learn from people around me. So I got my first job right out of Central. I was teaching in Yakima, and I was coaching football and wrestling, and just really loving life, and somehow ended up as an administrator. And my wife and I both grew up on the west side of the mountain, so we knew eventually we wanted to get back, and my daughter was starting kindergarten last year, so it seemed like the natural time to make that move. And then we were very specific about this area in the state because we're outdoors people. We love to hike. We love the mountains. In fact, we were just up on Snoqualmie Pass yesterday. So anything outdoors, we want that outdoor recreation right in our backyard. So that was very important to us, to be close to family and then to be close to the things we love to do. So that's how I got here.
That's great. Like, you've been in the position at Black Diamond Elementary School as a principal for 2 years. And anytime you step into a new job, there's all sorts of, new things to learn, new staff to get acquainted with, a new community that you're serving. So that's always unique and difficult in itself. But then COVID hits, right? This little thing called COVID. And your world, I'm sure, has been turned upside down. Like many of us, all of our worlds personally or even professionally has kind of been flipped upside down a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about what this season's been like for educators as you've kind of tried to navigate this new COVID reality?
It's like it has been for many of you. It's been extremely difficult. We're having to completely reinvent what we do, and our teachers get a lot of we call it in the elementary school, we get our buckets filled from our kids. Teachers work silly hours. I know, public perception is not that, but, regularly when I'm leaving the school at, 4:30, 5 o'clock, teachers are still there, hours past when their day ended, because they want to put out the best possible product for your children. And this has really ramped that up even more, because we're not only trying to teach as well as we can, like we always do, but we're having to learn how to do it in a completely different way. And then it's kind of the same thing as we're planning to return to school at some point. So many of those things that we took for granted, as far as how we walk in the hallways, how we use the bathroom, how parents drop off and pick up, we're reinventing every single aspect of school. So it's been interesting. It's been time consuming, and we want our little people back, and that's usually what makes everything okay for us. And right now we don't have that, so that's been difficult. But I know everybody's facing that in their own ways.
Yeah. So I have 2 kids at home, and so we're doing the homeschooling thing, and recognizing my wife's really good at it. I'm not called to be an educator, but yeah, you're in that too, right? So you and your wife, you both work, and you have a daughter who's in, I guess, 1st grade now. Yeah. And so you're trying to do the homeschool thing at the same time you're trying to help administer this homeschool to every kid that's affected in your district, or in your school, I should say. And so, what would you say to parents who are feeling the brunt of education in this season, and who are maybe just frustrated with everything that's happening?
You know, there's a couple of ways to kind of approach that. And I guess the first, as a parent, I get it. I get it. When you get home from, I get home from a long day at work, and my wife works from home, which you would think is a great setup for this, but it's really not, because she actually still has to work from home. So, it's oftentimes schoolwork's getting done as I'm cooking dinner, my wife's cooking dinner, and, our daughter's sitting up at our little island in our kitchen with her Chromebook out, and she's, asking questions and trying to work through things with us. So I get it. I get the challenge of it. And just for some insight, like many of you, my kids don't want to learn from me. Your kids probably,
so it's not just me.
No, it's not just you. It doesn't, to a 6-year-old, it does not matter if you're a principal, a teacher, anything else. They want to learn from their teacher, because their teacher knows, and you don't know anything as a parent. That's just the nature of our children. So, give yourself grace in those moments. Our young kids are resilient. They're going to get through this. I'm not worried about our little kids, to be honest. I'm worried about our big kids, for mental health and those sorts of things. But our little kids are so resilient. They're going to get right through this. But they want to learn from their teacher, because their teacher's the one that knows. And give yourself grace in the sense that we don't expect you to be a teacher. We don't expect you to be able to know everything that you're supposed to know. You're not trained in that. We're doing our best to make the information as digestible and as easy as possible, but lean on your teachers, and they can tell you, like, just full disclosure, my daughter doesn't get everything done every week. We do our best, and we sure try to make sure that we hit everything that the teacher wants us to do, but ultimately our relationship, mine as her dad and her as my daughter, is more important to us than if she gets a little bit behind in first grade. We can make that up. So give yourself that grace to just say, you know what, we're gonna close the computer for the day, we're gonna walk away, we're gonna have lunch together, we're gonna do something fun, and we'll try again later. Because your relationship with your kids is more important than a little bit of what's happening at school right now, because this isn't going to last. It's not going to last forever, and we're pretty good in schools about getting the kids caught up, and everybody's going to be at the same point. It's not like we're going to come in and kids are going to be soaring and other kids are going to be way behind. Most kids have been out of school for about a year now, so we're prepared for that. That part's easy for us. That's not a daunting task.
Yeah, well, I think that, just as a dad, I think we all feel the pressure as parents, our kids need to do well in school so that they can go to a good college and so they can get a good job and so they don't live with us forever. And come on, we have an end goal here. And so there is a tension this season, is my kid falling behind, that we can get stressed. So I do appreciate you just letting us hey, it's okay. Honestly, for me, my wife would attest, because she's in the service, she would attest, I'm you got to get everything done. And my wife's more of the no, it's okay. They can miss a few assignments. And so it's good for me to hear that as well. So this is a hard season for all of us. It's a hard season for our teachers. They've had to flip to online, translate their curriculum to a new environment, try to figure that all out. They're working harder than they've ever, and they already work incredibly hard. And yet, maybe my mistake is I go on social media and I go on Facebook. We have these wonderful groups that represent our cities that are filled with words that represent hate in my mind. But anyways, you go on there, and it's literally the perception is that everyone is just furious with our teachers, furious with our educators. They're just not happy about everything. And so could you talk a little bit about maybe the impact that has on educators, on teachers? Go ahead.
Well, I think the first thing that I think is important for our community to know is this is not what we want. We're not holding the line saying, hey, no, we like teaching online. I promise you we do not. And I can speak for my little staff of just under 50 up at the school, but we love our kids and we want our kids back. But we also don't want to put our kids at risk. So it's a definite balancing act, but almost all of us are parents too. So we understand the struggles of trying to educate your child, trying to take care of childcare needs when you're a working parent, and all of these things that are not normally our concerns. But I will definitely say that the things that they read on social media, and I had to make a personal choice. When I started in school administration, I just got off of social media. It just wasn't a healthy place for me to live, because it's an easy place for people to throw stones. But our teachers feel that, and I hear almost every day about someone saying something on Facebook or posting something on Instagram or something that's just negative about what they're doing in our school system. And unfortunately, human nature, we hold on to those things. And teaching's personal. You don't want it to be personal, but teaching is a personal thing because you pour your heart and soul into it. So when you are critical of your child's teacher, they take that very personally, and they hold it, and they'll hold it with them for days and weeks, and it hurts them, because I promise you, they are doing everything they can to do this job as well as they can with the restraints that people like me give them, because they don't always have final say in everything. And it's really, frankly, it's not the teacher's choice whether or not we go back to school right now. It's, the school board has to make those decisions. So they have a voice, but it's not their decision.
Yeah. Well, I think too, like, you talk a little bit about them holding on to that, and it's not all bad, right? Like, there are great things. There are, great things that people are doing to say thank you to teachers. We were talking between the services that you said, like, kind of in education, it's like for every 9 sort of positive statements, you can make 1 sort of corrective statement. You need that balance. And even though we're adults, it's not that different. And so there are good people. There are people saying thank you to our educators, but you hold on to them because the balance isn't quite right and isn't quite there. What I've been impressed, really, as my kids, a different school district, but my kids, they walk through this season, is to see the way that their teachers have chosen to love them in very different circumstances. Like, we do a school pickup, where we go pick up supplies, and the teachers almost every time have something in there for the kids, something unique. The last week, my daughter had a card, and the teacher sent home a card to every student telling them what they're thankful to them and how they've behaved. And so that's been cool as a parent to see the way, even in difficult times, teachers have continued to choose to love my kids. Can you maybe talk about some of the ways that you guys have done that at Black Diamond Elementary School?
Yeah, and I think one of the points that I can make is just that those things, those gestures from our families when people are giving back to us, mean the world to us. It's, it's most Mondays when I get into work and I check my email, I'll have 1 or 2 positive things from a parent, and it's sometimes the timing of people is there's not really a better explanation than it's God's plan, because you're at the low of lows and you get a message from a parent that just says thank you, and it means the world to us, and it could be anything for your teachers. We don't need coffee cards to feel loved. We just need to know you're there and you care about us. And a phone call or a handwritten note or an email are just the things that make all the difference in the world for us, because we're not getting that daily. I don't get 300 hugs a day anymore. And that was typical. I get a couple from my kids at home, but I don't get any from my kids at school. And our teachers are feeling that too. That feeling of satisfaction that we get from teaching our kids each day and seeing them break through a wall and do something new and learn something new. We're not seeing that as much. So, if your child's feeling that their teacher's doing a good job, let them write to their teacher. Let them send them an email. Our kids are gaining some skills that are kind of spectacular right now that we would have never expected, and, utilize those things. We've had community members come and do some wonderful things for us, and we've been able to do some fun things for our kids too. We went through our major neighborhoods and got to write messages to kids, and we've done parades and things like that. We've made a ton of videos for our kids, just silly videos with our mascot Franklin Fox and I doing kind of different things around the school, and teachers have done that on an individual level as well. And it's just it's really fun to have those times to connect in different ways, because we can't do the normal things.
And so I think I asked you this first service, but I want to say it because I think it's eye-opening to me. If you could poll your teachers, would you say the vast majority of them feel loved or feel attacked in this season?
Certainly a lot more attacked. And that's hard for me to say, because a lot of what I try to do in my role is to insulate our staff from some of that stuff and make sure it doesn't get to them, and I just can't stop it all right now. And I don't know if it's I don't necessarily know the reason. I know people are struggling, personally, and that a lot of that is coming out at us, unfortunately. And people are saying and doing some pretty nasty things to educators right now that is kind of unprecedented, because typically we're a group that's pretty well loved by parents, with just we're usually in that 9-to-1 ratio. We get those 9 positives to our 1 negative, and that's kind of been turned on its head right now. So whether it's through social media or even just direct contact, there are people that just are really taking this as an opportunity to attack someone who really is not going to defend themselves, and they know that because of our role, and because of our role with kids, that I guess we're easy targets.
Yeah. Well, I would love to say that all of those attacks are by other people, but no one from inside the church, or no Christians would do that. But I'm not foolish, and I know that as Christ followers, we haven't always lived up to the call that we have in our lives to be people of love. And so I'm grateful for you to share that reality, because I think that is an eye-opening reality, but also to help us understand some of the ways that we can very simply come alongside and to let our educators know their value and the worth that they bring. Because again, I've mentioned this, this is not my wheelhouse, and more than ever, I'm just incredibly grateful for all that teachers do to help our kids grow and to learn and get through some of those walls. And so, and I appreciate your transparency and willingness to share from the heart on some of that stuff, because it's not all rosy, right? But we want to, as a church, we want to do our best to come alongside and say thank you. And so one of the things I want to ask you, or invite you to do in participation with us, is to take some time to thank your educator. And I know, if you have kids at school, that might be a lot easier to do. You can do it through email. We actually put a card on most of the seats in here that are a thank you card. If you're the kind of person that would love to write a card, we'd encourage you to do that. If you want to write and mail that card to your teacher, to your school, go ahead and do that. But if you just want to write a card to an educator, even if you don't have kids, right? Even if you don't have kids, it doesn't matter. Educators love to know their value and worth. If you want to write a card just to say thank you, we can collect it on your way out, and we'll make sure it gets to Tim and his team to say thank you. I'm also kind of excited. Our kids team over in the kids area is recording short little videos, and we're going to compile a video together to be able to say thank you to teachers. And if you're tuning in online and you got a kid at home, if you want to record something, you can tag Lake Sawyer Church on Facebook or Instagram, and we'll get that video in there as well. I really feel, guys, as a church, though, this is not something we just should do. It's what we're called to do. When people look at Christians, when people look at Lake Sawyer Church, what they should say is that those are people defined by love. That those are people who love others, not when it's convenient. Because I'll tell you, it's easy for me to love my kids' teachers when life is normal and things are going good. It's harder to find a place for that love in difficult seasons, but more than ever, I believe that is exactly what we're called to do, to show love, not just to our educators, although this is a very tangible way, but to our frontline workers, to the people who are bagging groceries at the grocery store, or medical professionals, to our law enforcement people. These are the people that they need to know that we care and that we love them, and that's our calling as Christ followers. Tim, I want to pray for you, but before I pray for you, anything else that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you. It's very important for me, as a school leader, to form a faith-based partnership, and that's not always an easy thing to do, because we're making sure that we're following all the rules. But I think our kids need to have good people in their lives who care about them, and the church seems to be a place where a lot of people who just care and are willing to give back are. So, I've from the time that I started and Jennifer and I started to speak about a partnership, I've had nothing but positive experiences. And just even when I get to come and do things like this, it just really, I just feel so good being here and being around people that, that love our community and are willing to give back. And I just appreciate you all so much. So thank you for having me.
Let me pray for you. Father God, I thank you so much for Tim and his team at Black Diamond Elementary School. And God, this is a season that none of us we're hoping for, yet it's the season that we find ourselves in. And in the midst of this season, there is tension, there's pressure, there's frustration, there's all sorts of things, God. But I pray that as your people, that we can push that aside and be the kind of people that that just live out love for others. And God, I pray that you would help us just come alongside people in our sphere of influence, come alongside our local educators and let them know how much they're loved, how much they're valued. And God, how much we appreciate all the sacrifices they make and what they do. We ask that you just continue to watch over Tim and his team in the coming weeks and months as things are perpetually changing, that God, you would give them the ability to pivot and to maneuver and continue to keep the priorities of the kids at the forefront. And God, I pray that you would fill Black Diamond Elementary School with your love, that would be known and felt by the kids, but also known and felt by the teachers and the staff there. And I thank you so much for Tim's leadership and his transparency and his willingness to step up in a difficult season, to be the person, to be the leader that school needs. So continue to encourage him, to bless him in the work that he does. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Would you give me a favor and give Tim a big round of applause? In first service, we had an incredible opportunity to be able to baptize 2 people, an opportunity to help them take their next step in their decision to follow Jesus. And so even though that was first service, we did capture that moment that we want to be able to share with you. So go ahead and take a look at the screen.
Well, this morning is a really special morning. We've got a lot of great things going on here, and one of them is baptisms. We have 2 baptisms today. Yes. Baptism is a biblical response to faith, and we see the example of this in what Jesus did. Jesus was baptized, and all through the pages of Scripture, we can see this as an example, as a response to your faith. And so I want to introduce you this morning to somebody special. Her name is Tammy, and I'm like, God, because I do that, but it's because she's special. Tammy started with us online. She was living in Seattle and was trying to find a church, and she found Lake Sawyer, and she started attending online. And when she did that, you guys wrapped your arms around her, and she became part of Lake Sawyer. And a couple of weeks ago, she came in person, and here she is. She gave her life to Christ. And today, you get to be new, brand new. And the water isn't magical. The water is just water. But what you're doing is a symbol to God. And you're telling him and the world that I want to live for you. And so when you go down under that water and you come back up, what it's representing is your death of your old self, burial, and your resurrection and new life. And so, thank you for sharing this with us today. Go ahead.
Tammy, do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he came to this earth, lived a perfect, sinless life, but even though being sinless and perfect, he took on my sin, he took on your sin, and he went to the cross, he was put in a grave, but he didn't stay there. And 3 days later, he was raised up to resurrect, and he said to all of us, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
I'm so grateful for people who are willing to share this moment with us as a church. We get to do that twice today. So I'd like to introduce you to Brian. And Brian was coming to a men's group here on campus. And we also have a situation where people wrapped their arms around him, started introducing him to Jesus. And he knew there was something bigger that he was looking for in this life. And so he has had an opportunity to have conversation with James and with several people about who Jesus is. And he decided also to give his life to him. And so we're so grateful that you're here and you're sharing this moment with us too. So you are going to do the same thing. You're going to go down under that water. And when you raise back up, we're going to celebrate with you because this is new life in Christ.